This is Archiverse, the Miiverse Archive Project. 1 year later, to introduce myself, I am Tim Miller. I work in DevOps at Microsoft as a web developer out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm a member of Archive team, and I am the lead on the Archiverse project. So I helped archive Miiverse before it was shut down, and then put it back online a few months later with the website archiverse.guide. Archive team's general goal is to vacuum up as much data as possible before websites get shut down. So this was just another extension of that to try to preserve Miiverse, which created Archiverse. And we have a ton of stuff. This was launched on January 2nd, 2018. So last year, yeah, just over a year old, so our first year anniversary. And it has over 17 terabytes of data, all on the Internet Archive, hundreds of millions of posts, like hundreds of thousands of screenshots, drawings, like 6+ years of Miiverse going all the way back to the very beginning. All indexed, searchable, completely free, open source. You can get the website, you can get everything. You can make your own version of this if you wanted to. It's all completely free. And so what I'm going to be talking about is this project, what we did in order to archive it, and what it took to get all of your stuff back online. But the first thing I'm going to talk about for a little bit is Miiverse. Now, I'm going to go by reading the room, which is, a few people. Probably have an idea of what Miiverse was, but, in general, Miiverse also means different things to different people, both to the product developers and those who were creating the site at the time, and how users treated it after the fact. And so I just want to go a little bit into it. So Nintendo said that Miiverse was a space where users could share their feelings about games with each other. That's how they described it, which ostensibly is what they were setting out to do, right? So it launched on, or the first post I should say, was on November 16, 2012. It launched a few weeks later with the release of Miiverse. They had content on it before it launched. And it was shut down on November 8th, 2017. It was a family-friendly social network for Nintendo games. Initially launched on the Wii U as part of it. It was a baked-in feature throughout its entire life. And right when you turned it on, you got content from Miiverse on your main screen. So it would always show something new going on in the community based on something you were doing or some app you had opened or whatever Nintendo decided to show you. And it gave a very active community feel. It made you want to turn on your Wii U and try to, keep you engaged, which is the goal of a social network, keep you engaged. And so from there, you can go into the app. And the app is where you can actually go into game communities, write up posts, share your feelings about games, and also create drawings and do other stuff that would, talk to your friends. It's a social network, right? It was later added to the 3DS as a feature update, and then to the web after that, so you can go to miiverse.nintendo.net and do most of the same things except for drawing. Drawing was limited to the devices. You also had game integrations too, right? So, for example, like New Super Mario Brothers, you could post in the game, like after a level, Nintendo would prompt you and say, hey, post about this level you just completed, and it would show up in the game for other people to see. You could leave notes behind. Splatoon also had a similar feature like that for in their Game Plaza, you would see posts. And Smash Brothers had a Miiverse stage where you would see content inside of the game as you were playing it. So based on the characters you had selected, you could see there were support communities where you could draw, and it would show up in the game at the time. Well, the stage is pretty simple, though. It's still an interesting idea to have that sort of content, just being auto-generated based on what's already there, right? And for that, you need to have a very good content management control, and sometimes stuff would slip. But in general, Miiverse was very much known for its content management. They had active mods that were always going in and trying to prune content, which goes with what it was, a family-friendly social network. So sometimes things would slip, and usually that would end up generating a meme on the internet at large. And there were plenty of sites that delve into that and other panels that delved into that. But usually they would get taken down very quickly. And Miiverse was mostly known for its non-toxic status, which is saying a lot on the internet. So It would go on for years. It would go through various iterations, various rule changes. Things would, update, and the community would shift based on what Nintendo wanted it to do. But in general, life on Miiverse was good. It lasted from 2012 and kept on trucking along until the Switch was announced. So the Switch, announced on October 2016 and released in March of 2017, Nintendo announced that they were not going to add Miiverse to it. They were not going to port it to their new system. And so for us in the archiving world and the world at large, that means that a service like Miiverse was on death watch. It was only a matter of time before Nintendo decided, we're going to shut this down, because why? If you're not going to port it to the new system, why would you keep this running? Doesn't make sense. So it's only a matter of time. And sure enough, on August 29th, 2017, Nintendo announced that they were going to shut down Miiverse that year, November 7th. So stating that, thanks to user support throughout the years, we were able to achieve the goal of allowing people to share their feelings about games. I'm glad that's the only time you could do that. They've decided that to end the service because, among other reasons, users are shifting to other social networks. Now, for the others, among other reasons, you can only speculate. They only gave literally one. I have theories about it as a software developer, things like GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, things of trying to, which is, to put it briefly because it's really complicated, EU regulation about managing personal data. I have a sneaking suspicion that was going to go into effect the next year, and Nintendo probably said, yeah, we don't want to manage this data anymore. It's a good time to kill it. But the other part, which they do specify, of saying many users shifting to social services or other social networking services, I'll show some charts later on about it because we could do some analytics on the data we got. I don't think it's necessarily that Miiverse itself was dying, like the user post wasn't as necessarily popular as it used to be, but it's more of what the changing target of what the target market that Nintendo was aiming for versus the Wii U and the Switch. So, for example, if you go back to that main screen on the Wii U, for Miiverse, you see a very friendly screen. A lot of green. Miiverse was always very green for some reason. That was their design. But it matches what Nintendo was going for with a family-friendly service. It is childish a bit, but it goes with that flow. It makes sense. But when you look at the Switch, for example, this is the main screen for the Switch. While generally it's friendly. It's definitely Nintendo. You can feel that design, like to get into my design, put on my design hat. It's not the same thing. Like the market for the Wii U was families. That's what they aimed it at. It was the extension of the Wii. They called it the Wii U. The Switch was, if you looked at all the ads, you looked at all the target videos, it was aimed at millennials. They were targeting a different market. And millennials, gonna go on a limb, probably aren't gonna post on Miiverse. They already have social networks. So Miiverse is redundant. Why would you want to go there? When you can already go to Facebook and Twitter and share all of your game content with a much, much wider audience than what Nintendo was offering, there is no reason to have your own network where it is an insular being. Although it may have made sense for them to do it at the time when, one, you want to control your content, two, you want people to share it, and you can also monetize it if you're controlling your own network. By sharing it out with others, you can, literally expose your games and your third parties' games to other people. So it didn't make sense for Nintendo to keep it to themselves. And although you could theoretically share a Miiverse post on Twitter or other sites, it makes more sense just to let you do it directly. Also, on a side note to that, because Nintendo didn't have to maintain a network anymore, they also didn't have to do content management. So they could let Twitter or Facebook deal with content management, which is a good thing because there's one thing I know about Twitter and Facebook is that they are very good at content management. But yeah, so they can externalize basically everything out to other networks. They don't need to do it themselves. Of course, it would also affect games too. So Nintendo put out a FAQ talking about their closure and saying, like, okay, what's going to happen once Miiverse shuts down? And so Some stuff, it's like talking about the games where you had that integration, it's like mostly it's just the social aspects of the game would be removed. So for example, like Super Mario Maker, which was released a year prior, I think it was September 2015, you would lose the ability to comment on comment on levels. You can still make levels, you can still share them, but you can't comment on them. All right, not so bad. The Smash Brothers stage, the Miiverse stage, would keep the stage, but all the background content would be removed. So you would have just a black background, which, all right, I guess that works, but sure. Splatoon would also lose all of its posts for the Plaza, which is interesting to me just because in Splatoon 2, they added that feature because it's so iconic, they kept it, but it would be removed from the first game, but they kept it for the second game because it's a separate thing, they could just remake it. But in general, it's like not the worst thing. The only game that really, at least in this list, that would be adversely affected was Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which had a level in it that was a community level, which means you couldn't beat it because Miiverse no longer existed, so you couldn't 100% the game, which, for a completionist, that kind of sucks. But in general, it's like, it's bad, but you could say it's like it's legacy. Everything in this was released at least a year before. It's not the biggest deal, so to Nintendo, all right, you lose that feature, but whatever. In their eyes. And they were also going to offer an archive, which most sites, when they shut down, don't even do. So they were going to attempt to appease users who may be mad that all of their content, all their posts and stuff, and all their drawings would be thrown away. They were going to try to make amends and offer an archive. So after it ended, you would receive a link where you would get your post and all of the images in your album. So all the screenshots you took, all of the drawings you had, and all of the posts. But if you notice, in the gray text, you also have comments made on posts and messages with your friends would not be included, and posts that were deleted or banned because of the code of conduct would not be included. Now, the second one kind of makes sense. You're not going to get the post that they deleted. But the comment on posts kind of sucks, because one thing you could do on Miiverse, if you look at my example here, on the left side you have a post in the Splatoon community, very nice drawing. And you also have on the right side, on this, you have all of comments on that post. So you could draw in the comments on a post, including comment on your own post. So here you have, my Japanese is pretty shitty, but you have someone saying, hey, nice drawing, it's good, I'm envious of it. And it's like, oh, thank you. And then it's like, thanks for responding to me. It's like, people thanking each other for encouraging each other to draw or talk to each other. It's very nice. You're making friends. It's a social network. All of those posts would be lost. So things you drew on other people's comment boards would be gone. So you're losing a ton of stuff. Even though they're kind of offering something, you're losing a bunch of context, which to me is utter, utter nonsense. And also, this was opt-in, which also pissed me off. So in order to even get anything at all, you had to go click that link, and at some point you would get a link back a few months later. I think it was December of 2017. You would get a link back. If you didn't click it, you got nothing, which is, again, insane. And also, if you when you got that link after Miiverse shut down, it would only last for a few weeks. So if you didn't click that button, you wouldn't get anything. If you didn't click the link that Nintendo sent you an email after it got it, you then still wouldn't get it. And also, it was one time only. So if you downloaded it and deleted it, yeah, it was gone. Which, again, is like, I can appreciate the offer, but you're missing the point. It's like, you go all the way with it. Don't go halfway. And the one thing that tends to get forgotten about when shutdowns happen is the users, or what I should say are the people. Because when Nintendo talks about it, or when any company talks about shutting down a social network or shutting down a website where people are contributing content, they always refer to it as users or customers, or thank you for your participation. We are now shutting down. Users can do X, Y, Z. And as somebody who's in this field, and I've been involved in social networks and customer-facing services before, you always refer to people as users, as trying to separate out, it's very passive, feels very foreign, very digital, it feels very far out of the way. But when you think about it, everything in a social network is made up of people. It's always people. Everybody puts themselves into it. And so when you just toss stuff like that, like you have to be very careful with your phrasing because you want to be as gentle as possible. But really, all it is everybody you're making friends with, everybody you're talking to, and it's all gone, and you have no real recourse to do anything about it. But I did click that button when I saw it because I'm like, all right, I gotta click the button. Like it would be really wrong of me not to because I want to see what they're gonna offer. But I wasn't happy about it. And so it made me really, sad. I mean, I wasn't a major Miiverse user. I have a Wii U, I have a 3DS. I posted, I think it was like 12 times, mostly in Splatoon, just, shit posting. I was just post whatever, which I think most people did. It wasn't very serious service. But still, what I ended up thinking about was all of those websites when I was a kid that I would post to, or sites like that. Like I can remember I was on the G4 forums when I was a teenager, and it was when it just started, and I was on there for like years. And if you think I'm annoying as a 30-year-old, you don't want to see me as a teenager. But it was very like all that stuff is gone. And so I can't see any of that stuff now if I wanted to relive that history. And on the one hand, kind of glad about that because I don't know if I want to, but I still kind of do. It's a part of our digital heritage. And so losing it, it takes a little bit out of us. And so thinking about a lot of the people who would run on this stuff, who would use this site, they were kids. It was a family service. A lot of the users were young. And so all of their stuff that they were doing would be just tossed. And you never see it again. That sucks. And so I try to think, what could I do about it besides just get my stuff back? And that's where Archive Team steps in. So Archive Team, we're going to rescue your shit. That is our slogan. We've been dealing with mass site deletion since 2009. That's when we were founded. And when the site goes down, what we do, for whatever reason, they go out of business, deprecate a feature, whatever, we step in and try to get as much stuff as possible from the wreckage and get it back online so you can get your stuff back, no matter what it is. It's because to us, it's not a matter of what we find interesting or what we think is important. It's what you think is important because it's your things. That's really all that matters in the end. And so I remember hearing about them through various talks by Jason Scott, who founded Archive Team, and who is an amazing guy. And if you haven't seen his talks, go on YouTube and search for them, Jason Scott. He's amazing. And I remember him, and I remember like all of their projects, and so I thought, like, well, if they know anything about archiving, they're either A, got to know about this, and B, probably want help, because why not? So I was like, I should ask them for help, or see if they're doing anything for it. So I joined up with them. The nice thing about it was that when I joined up with them, I was like, hey, can I become a member? And they were like, all right, you're a member. That's all it takes, really. It's like, can you contribute? Can you help? Can you do anything? Yeah, you're a member. That's all it takes. It's really, it's a very open system. If you want to help, just go to Archive Team and they will take you, because it's really just about like trying to help get people involved in this effort. And so we came up with a list of objectives. There are things that we need to do first for anything else so we can get started on this project. So first is grab as much shit as possible before November 7th. We need to get data. Throw it on Internet Archive. Figure out the rest later. If you don't have data, you can't do anything else. So the thing we need to figure out is just get as much of it as possible, throw it on the web. All right, that seems kind of vague. So let's see, where do you start? That's kind of hard. It's like, well, where do you start archiving? It's kind of complicated. There's a lot to it. And so really you have to like try and boil it down. It's like, well, what do we want? What we want is user-generated content. What we want is your stuff, your posts, your things. And so what does that mean? Well, we want all the metadata. We want not just your posts, but we want, the comments. We want all of the extra drawings. We want, the history of the site. Try to preserve as much of the culture of the site as possible, which is all of the game stuff, all of the, communities. Trying to make as much of that as possible. But I didn't know what that meant, though, to archive that, trying to save all that metadata, trying to save all of those like intricacies. I didn't know what that meant. So I had to have them help me explain it, because I couldn't figure it out. I wasn't really sure like what tools or what things were used. So briefly, we're going to go into a little web archiving 101. I try to boil it down because I can get really technical with it. So so we're going to try to keep it very simple, hopefully, right? So first we have a computer. We have you. We have your user. You have the person who is on the computer who is, wants to access something. Let's say you want to access somebody's user account on Miiverse. So what do? You go to your browser. You go to miiverse.nintendo.net, and you ask Miiverse, the server, and say, get me this user. I want to see my friend's account for whatever reason. And so Miiverse goes, all right, I know that account. And oh, I have that content. That person isn't banned. They're available. I can give it to you. And so, all right, good to go. I'm going to give you it. And so then you see on your screen the user profile page, right? And so the idea of what we want to do is basically try to replicate all of these requests. What we want to do is say, like, the end result is that page, that web page, the HTML, the JavaScript, the images, and all that other stuff. And what we want to do is be able to preserve that. Because if we can preserve those web pages, we could reconstruct a lot of the order and history of Miiverse by going through and troving through it. But it's not just a matter of just saving this end result. Because how do you store it? Like, how do you maintain all of this stuff, all of these images and things that make up this page? There's a format for that. So archivers have thought of that. And so there's a thing called WARC, short for Web Archive. And what it does is it saves the user's request, the thing you type into the browser, the response from the server, the HTML, the things that it gets back, all of those additional metadata, all of the images, everything else, and a timestamp of when it happened. So it says, at this time, this thing, user, requested this from the server and then got it back. It is stored in an archive file in a database within that file, and it can be played back with software. So you could write software against it, so then you can replay that and say, what happened at this time for this URL? Okay, this is the response that it gave, and I can replay it back in the browser. This is roughly how the Wayback Machine, web.archive.org, works. Which, if you haven't seen that, you should really go to web.archive.org, because it is an amazing service. In fact, everything on the Internet Archive is an amazing thing. Basically, what it does is when it crawls the web, it says, at this time, I requested this URL, and this is the response I got. And so when you go to web.archive.org and you type in a URL, like miiverse.nintendo.net, it will show you a huge list of all of the timestamps it got for those crawls. And then it will replay them back in the browser. So what we want to do is basically replicate that and try to get all of the stuff that the Wayback Machine itself can't get and store it outside of it. Archiverse only exists because of this system. If it wasn't for this and wasn't for them telling me this, it would not exist at all. So we have tools for doing this, for generating these WARCs. One is Archive Team Warrior. Now, Archive Team Warrior is a really cool tool. It's a software program that you can run on your computer. You can go to archiveteam.org and download this and run it on any computer you have lying around. And what it does is it connects to a central server, and it will basically turn that computer into a bot. And when it gets URLs from the host and says, we're going to start archiving X service. For example, this is Tumblr. So if you haven't heard, Tumblr started deleting a massive amount of adult content because their corporate overlords are shit, and decided that they want to delete a ton of adult content for the sake of advertisers. Which also includes, incidentally, a bunch of LGBTQ stuff because their flagging tools are totally crap, and so it would just go through and flag a bunch of stuff that it didn't need to. AI really sucks. But so we've been working on this. So this was 2 weeks of work, and I don't know if we can see there's data. 59 terabytes of data were grabbed in 2 weeks through a Warrior. And so I don't remember the exact count in the end. This was taken a few weeks ago, so I think it was more than that before they finally removed the content. But I think it was maybe 100 different people were running Warrior, and it got a ton of stuff in that short amount of time, which is nice. The problem with Warrior, potentially, is that it's a bit brutal. So it's called Warrior. If you give it access, it will hammer a website and get as much stuff as possible and potentially shut down the site through a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack. So you have to be really careful when it comes to that stuff. But if you need to get something really quick, Warrior's a great way to do it. We decided to change tack, though, and so we decided to go with custom scripts. So instead of using the very brute, hammer, we decided to go a little bit softer because Miiverse is a bit more fragile, and we didn't want to disrupt the service. We wanted to make sure people could still post, and Nintendo wouldn't ban us, which is also important because with Tumblr, they started banning IP addresses, which have also gotten the news because a lot of, we were hurting their site apparently. With Miiverse, we never got banned, so that was nice of Nintendo to not do that. But it was because I wrote some custom code that would generate warks, generate these URLs that we could then feed into the Internet Archive through our own set of bots. That was, I think, at the max we had 8 that were running, that were archiving stuff. But this way we have much more control. At the same time, it's slower, but we also had a little bit more time. It was about a month. So I figured it made more sense to go this way. But then it was a matter of, well, where do you start archiving? We need to be able to basically get all of the posts and stuff. We need to figure out how to crawl the website so we can start getting URLs so then we can start feeding these programs I would write. And so, well, where do you start with that? Well, the end result is you want to get the user's post. You want to get the drawings. You want to get the comments and all of that stuff. But in order to get that, those URLs are all generated, right? They're all URLs, long URLs that are not easy to guess. You can't increment them. You have to basically brute force it. Too much time. Can't do that. But we can also get user accounts. We could, go to miiversenintendo.net, user account name. But you can't search for users on Miiverse, so you have no way of being able to get that list either without brute forcing it, going through each single permutation and trying to see, okay, does this user exist? No, try again. Take too long, can't do that. But if we go through all of the game communities and then start archiving posts that way, and then start getting users, we might have something. And so that's what I started to explore. So for example, you have a list of games. Miiverse had a list of games for everything on the system for all regions. There was a filter you could change so you could see everything in the American region, Japan, and Europe. And so once we had that list, we could start parsing through it and see that, okay, here are the URLs for all of the community pages. I could start going through it and getting all of those URLs. Right? And once we started getting those, we then got the community page, which included a ton of content. So first is the header. Not that important, but we also have the post data. So some new posts that were coming in, kind of neat, but all right, that's obviously not enough. It's just one page for that day. So, but it's something. But then we have the users' feeds. They were separated out as in different entries for text, for drawings, for screenshots, for discussions, and in-game posts for the games that supported it. There were also some that had legacy feeds for games that were really old. You also have related communities, too. So the related communities would be either other games in the series, add-ons, or for like Smash Brothers, all those support pages, that stuff. You would get all that. And so now we have a bunch more URLs. We have a bunch more places we can start searching. And so then when we go to the feed pages for all the posts, now we start getting actual posts, right? That's nice, but we can start archiving that, but that's not all. We need the comments too. But now we have a list of URLs. So we can start going through those lists and start getting the actual post. And so the post has the comments. That's great. That is the end result. We want to get posts. And so then when we go there, we can also get all the comments too. We start paging through those and get all of the comments and get all of the posts for those comments as well, because you can also separate that out. But the best part is, at the very top, you have a user, and you have a username, and you have a profile page. And that's where the gold is. That's exactly what we want. Because once you have a user's page, you have a list of all of their posts, which is great. That is exactly what we need. What was also cool about that is the user's page had a bunch of extra content on it that we didn't know about at the time. So Miiverse, when it first launched, had a thing called Activity Feed. You could post on your own feed for your own account, a bit like a Twitter, and people could follow you, and it would show up on their main screen. Nintendo eventually got rid of that, probably because it was a recipe for a bunch of people doing RP, but it was a way of posting content to your own personal feed. They got rid of it, but they kept the post. You could not post to it anymore, but you could still find them. What they also had were a bunch of unlisted communities. Nintendo would generally create communities around certain times for different things, and they would delete them. It would remove from the game community list, but it would still appear in the profile feeds for the users. So, for example, for this one is Nintendo E3 2013. Nintendo would make an E3 community every year until the end, until 2016. And they would delete the community, but the post would still be on the user profile page. And so now we could reconstruct it. Once we got a bunch of users, we could start getting all of that data and then reconstructing it back. And this was a very happy time in 2013 where people were very excited. Got more depressed every year. But for the first year, they were pretty happy, and mostly was just bitching about Xbox, which I don't blame them. But now we had a bunch of user profiles, right? And also, the cool thing is, now we had a bunch of user profiles, they also had followers too. And so once we start getting user profiles and start getting comments where you have, profile links, people could also follow people. So we could start archiving that list too and get more profile links. So now we started getting a huge amount of posts. Because now once you start getting user profiles, you get all the post pages, we can start to go to work. But there was a rub to that though. Even though Nintendo announced that shutdown in August of 2015, or 16, they would still create community pages. So every time a game was released, they would still create a new community for it until the very end. So like the last day of the service, there was a community created because a game came out, which drove me and everyone else insane. So we had to keep up with all of these new communities being created, including for not just shovelware. So Metroid, that came out in September, and it was like, what the fuck? Why are they doing that now? On the one hand, we probably figured out it's because they had to keep while the service was still running, they had to keep making the communities. It was kind of forced by the design of the site, so it's like, all right. But you still had people post why is there a community when Miiverse is going to be shut down? I mean, they still posted a screenshot, but still, a lot of these were everything I'm posting here is going to be thrown away, so why would I post? It doesn't really make much sense. But we kept at it. We started putting stuff on the Internet Archive, so as stuff would go in, it would start getting filtered in. And then it also started going to my computer. So these are 4 hard drives, 5 terabytes each, so totaling about 20. I had to keep buying hard drives when I realized, oh shit, I need more. So I had to run down to the Micro Center and keep buying more. But then, at the very end, November 7th, 2017, 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Miiverse would end, not with a bang, not with a whimper, but with an error code of 1155004. And that was it. That was the end of our archive. Everything stopped. We couldn't do any more. We got as much as we could before the end. Nintendo would shut everything off, the CDN would go off, everything we could grab, gone. And so that was it. But these were the end results. So we ended up getting over 200 million replies, over 100 million posts, 75 million screenshots, 200 million drawings, 8 million user profiles, totaling around 17 terabytes of data. And then if you went to miiverse.nintendo.net, after that date, what you got was a very nice mosaic telling you, thank you for everyone who used Miiverse. Service has ended, and that was it. And so they also told you if you had your archive that it would be coming in the mail, and so it will be sent to the Miiverse address you had assigned. But that mosaic really annoyed me. It looks very nice. It was used in all of the press for the site. All of the articles that were written about Miiverse use this image, so it was very clever of Nintendo to make it. This was made through a community on Miiverse, created after the shutdown announcement, called Everybody's Message. And so they were telling you that it would potentially be used in a giant collage. And you could only post in it, you could only draw in it, you had to have a device, you couldn't do this on the web, you couldn't make comments, but you could draw, and it would eventually be put into that mosaic. But if you recall, back in that mosaic, none of that user data, none of those names were attached to any of that. And so Nintendo basically told people, please create something for us that we can then show on our website and then throw it away afterwards and then not give you credit for it, which is kind of a dick move. But the good news is we archive that community, and so we have all of that stuff, and so we have all of the usernames associated with it. And so you could go through it and see every one of those posts individually and who did it, which I think is kind of nice. I wish Nintendo would have thought of that, but hey, whatever. Probably would have been like a day of work. But the good thing is, all of that ended up on the Internet Archive, and so you could go to the Wayback Machine, type in miiversenintendo.net, and start searching through the stuff we grabbed, because it was all on there. But there was kind of a problem with that. So you could do it. You could go to miiversenintendo.net and see it, but most of the functions of the site wouldn't work. And that's kind of due to how the Wayback Machine functions. Most new websites are pretty JavaScript heavy, and the Wayback Machine doesn't really deal with JavaScript very well. So a lot of the new stuff that I do for my job, where we're making really advanced websites that aren't static and do a bunch of really dynamic stuff and look really cool, pain in the ass to archive. And they're still trying to deal with that. But the content is still there, but you couldn't actually go through pages. You couldn't actually find users. You still couldn't do a lot of stuff. It was there, but it was still basically a black box, which is like not ideal. So I remembered back when we were doing this, I kept track of all of these pages and all of that HTML on the right side, and it kept a ton of stuff hidden in it. So what I could do is I could parse through all of this data again, since we had all of it available and I had it all on my hard drives. I could parse through it again and then go through and say, like, okay, what is this? What is this post? What is this community? What is this? And then I could turn it into a database. And so once I have a database, you can do a lot of really clever stuff with it. And so quickly, I'm going to go through some of the stats of things that I could find once I archived and parsed through all of this data and turned it into a structure that you could then start to query, right? So these are the number of posts and replies per day on Miiverse, according to our archive. So that's also important to mention. It's according to our archive. It ain't perfect. I'm sure we missed a bunch of stuff, so don't take it, don't take it perfectly. But the number of posts and replies per day. And so what you see on the very left side of the chart, right over here, so it's pretty low compared to the rest of it. Right? And so, but generally speaking, beyond this like one anomaly, you see basically we had like 100,000 posts or so per day, many, many more replies, which mildly makes sense. You have one post, you can have up to like 1,000 replies on a post, so exponentially, it kind of works, the math works. But you would see general spikes and things like that. You could actually mark a lot of these with specific game dates. So I think like in 2015 was Mario Maker. Mario Maker's feature was that you would post directly to Miiverse with your level. So it spiked the level list of when people started playing it a lot. So which makes sense. But even by the very end, it wasn't particularly like, it was a little less popular than it was back in 2015, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was still, being used. It wasn't the worst situation to be in. I mean, it's not Twitter, it ain't Facebook, it ain't a fire hose, but still, 200,000 posts per day, it adds up. It's not the worst. Also, speaking of this, to go back to it, this was when the Miiverse launched, right, with the Wii U. The only way you could access Miiverse, the only way you could post to it, was through the Wii U. And so that's why this is so much lower, because this is the day when 3DS support got added. And so then it spikes and just goes nuts. And so then you got a ton more stuff coming in because, shockingly, many more people had 3DSs than Wii U's. So it kind of explains why. Also, you can also see like every around January and stuff, it also spikes. Christmas time, which I think is kind of cool. But if you go back to that game community page, right, the game integration stuff with like Smash Brothers, and you have those community pages, so we archived all of those, right? And so what we could also do is see how many posts were in each community and see who had the most support in, for each community in Smash Brothers, to see who had the most drawings and stuff. And so what I thought was interesting about that was because a lot of this surprised me. The most was Kirby. Kirby had over 88,000. And then Sonic. Of course, Sonic would also be a meme machine. And then you have Link, Mario, so on and so forth. What was also interesting was the ones who had the least amount of support, because I was interested in that. Least amount of support, Diddy Kong, 9,000. Apparently people did not care about Diddy Kong. And most of these are not really I guess not really mainstay Nintendo characters. I guess you have some Fire Emblem people in there, Pit. But, not terrible. But yeah, I was definitely surprised to see Diddy Kong being completely disrespected there. these were the most replies in the community. So the interesting thing was the most you could reply on each post in Miiverse or in that community. So you would draw, it would only show the drawing in that game, but you could also reply on those posts. And so you have exponentially more for Sonic the Hedgehog than anybody else. It's almost twice the nearest amount of the next person. And I was interested in that. I'm like, why are there that many? And then you can go through it. There were some 1,000 post feeds for it. Almost all of these posts, Sonic RP. People would just post Sonic RP. And not only that, they would draw it. So you had people who were on device, on the Wii or 3DS, and they would just draw it over and over and over again. And so, which, fine, you do you. I'm not, no judging. But it was definitely a, like, whoa, when it came to that. And also, speaking of that, total deleted, also Sonic. So the most amount of posts that were deleted were, because we could track that, because Miiverse had that, yeah, Sonic 2. Also, Zero Suit Samus finally makes a showing, which I guess kind of makes sense why that would be in the top 3. There were also all of the game communities we grabbed, too. We could also start tracking and see what were the most popular game communities, what were the least popular, and get a general sense of what Miiverse was. But it wasn't really that interesting when I looked at it. I mean, I guess I'm one to judge, but it was like what you would expect: Splatoon, Mario, and that stuff. I didn't make charts for it because it wasn't really that interesting to me. But what was interesting was one game I saw, and it was one of those popular game communities. I know you're all going to think of this, and you're going to be blown away by it. But it was air hockey. Best of Arcade Games air hockey. And now some of you out there might be thinking, why the hell would this be interesting? Because it's Best of Arcade Games air hockey, a shovelware game for the 3DS. It existed. People did post in it, Apparently this person didn't like air hockey all that much, but it's fine. What interested me about it was this community had 37,000 posts. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily sound like a lot, but compared to the other games in this series, there were several. The next closest was Best of Arcade Games Bubble Buster. I think it's supposed to be a breakout-ish game or like a puzzle bobble. That had 230. So that's quite a bit more for this game. Why the hell did this game have so much more? So I looked into it. And so the first post, the game came out in August 2013, or 2015, excuse me, on the 13th. And a lot of the first posts were what you would expect for a new community. People who did not own the game saying first, because that's what people do. Posting general pictures, very nice, I can't draw anywhere close to this, of hockey sticks and other stuff. And people would just shitpost about air hockey, which, okay, you do you. This would die out like a week or so later, and people would just stop posting. There would be a little bit of screenshots, a few other things, but it would be, what the other communities were. Until December of that year, of 2015. And then you get this. Undertale. No one seems to post much in here. Maybe we could use this community to talk about Undertale. Okay. And from that point on, nothing but Undertale. Everybody would post Undertale. And that was it. Till the very end of the service, people would just post that. And people would do this in general, too, in other communities. You had, like, YouTube. YouTube had a community. Every game, every app had one. People would find places to just start posting. Undertale came out, and it was just everywhere. And so some people found this community was dead, and so they went, okay, we're just going to start posting here. And that's all they did. They would just post this from that point on. And not only that, you would also get stuff like that. I won't waste my post, so let's RP. All right. And then people would just RP in here, too. This was an interesting time, because this was when Nintendo put in a 30-day post limit, saying that, you can only post 30 posts per day. Now, we're going on a limb here. I mean, I know I'm not a project manager, but generally with the social network, you want people contributing content. Limiting it doesn't make much sense. Unless that content isn't stuff you necessarily want. And the people who would be very, very engaged were the people who were doing stuff like this. And that's probably not what Nintendo intended. But that's what people did. People would go in, find communities, even the actual communities for these games, and just start doing RP. They would keep going. They would go through all of these posts just talking about it. And yeah, that may not be what Nintendo wants, but people will find ways, given the tools they have, to do whatever they want in that community. You can't really control, what you want people to do. They tried. Content management is one thing, but the actual types of things you want people talking about is another. And so it's like, people are talking about the game, maybe not the way you want, or maybe not even games available on that system at that time, although Undertale is on the Switch now. But yeah, that's what people did. It's a social network. People talk to each other. They become friends. They, bond. And when you throw it away, everything goes. And sure, you may not care about this. I mean, I don't really care about RP that much. But to these people, they definitely cared. They went out of their way to do it on a social network that was not really designed for it. And sure, that also results in, memes and stuff being made. One of my favorites, bad Miiverse posts. For those cringy posts and that sort of stuff, which felt really out of place. Given what Nintendo said the service was and what people did, you would get a lot of weird content. You would get a lot of stuff that is like, shit. It is shit posts. That's what, the internet is made of. But what I also love is this guy, too, down here. There's the pinned post, one of the more popular ones. What is this guy? Guy buys every game, comments on how good the water is. It's nice. Nice looking water, amazing water. We have that guy's post. They weren't deleted. They were there. Edward Brooking. You can get it. You can get to it on Archiverse. It's there. And all of those posts are there. Now, granted, he wasn't actually just buying the game to talk about the water. I mean, that was a joke on the tweet. But I love this guy. When I saw this guy, because I wanted to go through all those posts. Oh, by the way, before I forget, for those Bad Miiverse posts, we have 2/3 of those. 2/3 of those posts were not deleted. They're on Archiverse. You can find them. They were not deleted at all. So it's kind of hard because a lot of them will comment out the name, but you can still find them. Nintendo couldn't, they weren't bannable or whatever. Some of the more, risque ones were. But that's also interesting to me. It's like 6,000 posts. We have like 2/3 of them. But I love this guy because he was just a normal dude. He was just an older gentleman. He had a kid. And would just talk about, the games he bought. He bought a lot of them, and would just, be a general, a person who just wanted to talk about games. And that's nice. One of the things I also liked is his most popular post on Miiverse was this one, for My First Songs community. He bought the game for his kid. This game is also mildly interesting. It was a mobile game, as was common when the Wii U wasn't exactly doing too hot. A lot of shovelware came out on it. It was available on iOS and Android, and for free. But you had to pay for it on the Wii U. And so people were joining the community just to bitch about that and say, like, how could you do that? That is so wrong. This guy bought the game for his kid, and he said, this kid loves it, which I'm not going to doubt him. It's probably a young child, and it's probably fine. And then says, and people in this post were complaining to him about that and saying, like, how could you say that? Other people were saying, go on you. That's fine. But others were complaining, and so he's like, this game's not made for you. It's meant for little kids. Why hate on it when it's not made for you? And that actually can be said about a lot of things, both pertaining to games and in general in life. And so I wish I could have that framed. Because really it is like just the core conceit of a lot of bitching on the internet of like, stuff's not made for you, don't worry about it. Eventually I would take that database and then turn it into the website, archiverse.guide. And so you can go to this website. Again, it's been live for a year, since January 2nd, 2018, excuse me. Which is also interesting because that's the day before MAGFest last year, and I went to MAGFest. I launched the website before I got on the plane, which, going into production before you get on a plane and then seeing people talk about it while you're on the plane and then landing and then having to fix shit once you're off the plane, very interesting experience. Probably wouldn't do it again, but it was definitely a fun plane ride once I started seeing people go to it and go like, holy shit, we have all this stuff. But it lets you, again, search through all of those posts, all those users, all those game communities we got, all the regions, developer communities, stuff that devs were posting about. Not the most precious stuff, but still it's a part of the history of the thing. Unlisted communities, replies. Everything points back to the Internet Archive, so you can see the original post. And then, again, all of this is open source. The database itself is open. You can get to that on Internet Archive. The code for the website is open. You can go to it on my GitHub, on github.com/drasticactions, and I have a link for it. You can deploy it yourself. You can host it. You can make mirrors of it. That is totally fine. And we started getting a lot of press. In fact, we got a hell of a lot of press. It kept coming in for days. And it really blew our minds. I mean, we get this stuff, like every time we do an archive, like Archive Team does, what we want is we want people to talk about it. It's not just for our own ego, but because we want people to be, to know, like, about the stuff that gets thrown away and what we try to do to save it, and try to shame the company to be like, you shouldn't do this. Companies shouldn't just throw stuff out. We need to have a better way of saying, like, of being able to preserve the content we have. Like, it's a part of our lives. It's our history, and just throwing it away because it doesn't fit your business goals anymore is awful. And so trying to shame it and trying to point out like all of that stuff and trying to give people back all of the things they thought were lost is great. Like, I still get comments from people who are like just thankful because Nintendo didn't send them their email, or they thought they were going to get their stuff back and they never got it back, but they could go to the website and they saw it. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this image I made back in 2012 is still here. I'm thankful for that, which is great. If only one person went to the site and got their stuff back, I'd be happy. And the fact that a lot of people do, to this day, we get about like, I think 100 users per day, unique people who've never been there before who still go to it, is still great. Like, we want that. We want people to be able to see all of the stuff that was tossed. And the last thing was from the article on Engadget, which I really liked, because they were talking about it and said, like, it's not, you're probably not going to be there that long. It's not really a thing that you're going to like, which is true. We weren't really designing it with the idea that you would make it your homepage. Although if you want to, go nuts. Like, we're not going to stop you. But it's not really a matter of tracking down specific references to games. It is, preserving an important part of gaming history. And that's true. Like, we're thinking of that. We want to be able to say, like, this was one of the first major social networks integrated into a game system. It's not the first, and people have told me that too, and I know. And there are other games and other things that have done similar things in the past, and that's fine. But it is, in this case, one of the first integrated game system social networking things that existed in such a way that we would resemble it to things like Twitter or Facebook. And the fact that it is there, and the fact that we try to keep it online for as long as possible and available in the Internet Archive means that hopefully it will never go away. And anybody in the future, no matter what time, will be able to find it and get it back. And that's really all we care about. And so that's my time. That's all I have. But thanks for sticking with me. Again, I know it's early in the morning, so thank you very much. You again, go to the site, archiverse.guide, Internet Archive, archive.org. Again, I highly recommend going there. Donate to them. They're a nonprofit. They definitely need money, and please give it to them. Don't give it to us. Archive team doesn't take money. Give everything to Internet Archive. Also, the video from earlier was from Game Explain because I was too busy that day to try to record Miiverse shutting down, so I couldn't do it myself. But I'm very glad they had 1080p footage that wasn't annoying. And so considering there's not that many people in this room, you can just come up and talk to me if you have any questions about it. I'm more than willing to take the time. But yeah, thank you. That's all I have. So again, thanks for your time. Hey.